So Michael J. Fox is trending right now, but it's for a pretty strange reason. CNN actually did a report that suggested he'd passed away. But it's his response that is really so great because he didn't just correct it. He said, "Hey, I'm alive, I'm okay, and I'm still active as ever." So he'd just been out in Los Angeles speaking on a panel for the show Shrinking. And he also filmed 3 episodes, so as a guest. And he was, that was his first time acting on screen in years. So the story going around on the surface is about a mistake that the newscasters made. But from my perspective, that's not really the story. The real question is, why does he still have that engine, right? Because if you remember him, if you know him at all from these shows from Back to the Future, like he was just always this energy bundle. And that didn't just start now at all, right? And I'm sure a lot of people look at this moment and frame it as, wow, he's so resilient, or he's persevering, or he has all this strength in the face of Parkinson's, right? And that's all true, right? But it's so incomplete because if you go back far enough, what you're going to see is that he's had this same pattern for a long time, even before his diagnosis. And that's what shifts the question, right? The question then becomes, if this drive didn't start just recently in his career or later in his career, where did it come from? Hi, welcome back. I'm Leezá Steinorf. I work with leaders and individuals on how they think and make decisions and how they can recognize and, let's say, shape the moments that create their trajectory and where they're going. So if you find something interesting in what we're sharing here, if it's different, helps you think differently as we go along, take a moment, like the video, subscribe so you know when new ones come out, and leave a comment on maybe what would occur to you, what your thoughts are. We've got a pretty cool community building here. So to understand the kind of energy that Michael J. Fox has, you actually have to go back to the mid-1980s. And at that time, if you can imagine, television and film were totally separate tracks, right? Computers weren't even on the scene, not in entertainment anyway, in daily life, not at all, right? So Michael J. Fox was already a superstar on a TV show called Family Ties, and he was super successful. Like you'd see his face on all these magazine covers. He had financial security, he had career security, like he had this really clear path forward. So it's not that he needed more, but when the opportunity came to do Back to the Future, the film, if you can imagine, he was only 24 years old, but he recognized something really different about it. And it wasn't just that it was an opportunity. He saw like this window and he saw the potential in that project. So I'd like to point out that when you feel that kind of potential, when you feel that urge, that draw, that window of opportunity, your thinking changes. And you no longer are asking yourself like, how am I going to make all this work? How am I going to balance this out? You actually ask, what is this worth? Like, what am I willing to do, give up, deal with in order to make this work? Because that's exactly what he did. And that's why it makes so much sense. If you understand that distinction, you'll understand why he did what he did. So at the time, he had a contract with the TV company, right? He was doing Family Ties, and they wouldn't let him out of it. It was a firm contract. He agreed to it, fine. But he wanted to do the film, and he got clear on that potential and on what he wanted. That's what really drove him. So he filmed Family Ties during the day, and then at night, like he'd leave the studio for Family Ties, and then he'd go over to the studio for Back to the Future and he'd film at night. And he slept something, I think, like 4 hours a night. And then he did that the next day and he just kept repeating that. And obviously that kind of schedule is not sustainable. Like nobody could do that forever. And he also knew it wasn't sustainable. But that's what makes actually this decision so precise. It was intentional. So that's now how the story shifts, because this isn't about someone who's overworking or like just stretching themselves to the limit at all. It's about someone who made a very specific decision. This moment is worth everything I have for a defined period of time. And once that decision is made, then something really interesting happens. Energy shows up. So that that actually raises a more, I'm going to say, curious and maybe even useful question. Is the energy that shows up, is that the cause or the result? Like, did he suddenly have that energy because he made this decision, or did he make the decision because he had the energy? It's an interesting thing to consider because most people think that energy is finite and you either have it or you don't, right? Or if you have it, you only have so much of it. But one of my principles is that energy follows our intention. Like vibrancy emerges when we're aligned. And with alignment, I mean aligned with our values, aligned with our desires, aligned with what we want to do in the world. So when you get clear enough that something matters, your capacity, I'm going to say, expands to meet it. Like your ability to be able to fulfill whatever that's asking of you rises because you've already set the decision. You've put it into motion. So your systems align to make it happen. And that's what Michael J. Fox seems to have. And it wasn't just drive, like it was clarity. He wasn't trying to do everything all the time, but he was responding to something very specific. He knew, he felt, he saw that window of opportunity, he felt that potential that it had, and then he designed his life and his process for those months. I think it was like 4 or 5 months that he did that crazy schedule so that he could do it all. But he knew that it had an end and he knew that it had a purpose, right? And you see that same structure in him show up again later, not in the same form, but in the same pattern. So for example, when he took on Spin City, he was already established. Like it was another super successful TV sitcom, but he didn't need to prove himself. Like it wasn't something he had to do, but he committed completely to that process and to that role. And he earned an Emmy, 3 Golden Globes, and 2 SAG Awards for that. I mean, it's pretty remarkable. And then came his Parkinson's diagnosis, and he was only 29 years old. That's pretty young, not only for that kind of success, but for that kind of diagnosis. And most people then would kind of, I think, expect that to be the moment everything changes, right? Like you get a life-altering diagnosis like that, and you slow down, you step back, you reevaluate. But he didn't. Not immediately. He didn't stop. He stayed. And he worked for years after his diagnosis. He's got a laundry list of acting awards. He's written 3 best-selling memoirs. He's a super big advocate for stem cell research and obviously for a cure for Parkinson's. So when you start to look at all that he's done and how he's done it, something starts to become clear, like it emerges that this wasn't situational, it was actually structural, like how he's walked through his life and his success and his actions has a clear structure based on his value system, and his energy shows up to meet that. So he makes his choices with clarity and intention. So that same energy drive, that engine that he had was already in place. So when now you look at today, he's speaking publicly, he's returning to the screen and shrinking, and even after this major news outlet announces that he's dead, he comes back saying, hello, I'm still here and I'm still active. So it doesn't feel actually surprising that he would do that. It really feels consistent because that's just what he keeps doing. He keeps showing up that way for himself in his world and in the world at large. And that leads actually to a deeper realization. This isn't about working harder. It's about working specifically. And as I've said, with intention. Because I don't think most people work with intention. They work with commitment. They distribute their energy level evenly to make sure everything's balanced, or they follow a roadmap that's been laid out, or without their real desires guiding the process. And there's no blame in this. Nobody's taught us how to organize our decisions and our direction according to what is important to us. So most people treat everything like it matters the same, and then they call it balance. But what they miss is that not all moments are equal, and not everything in our lives or opportunities that come to us are the same. Some moments maintain your life, and then others really drastically change it. And you get to choose how you engage with those moments. So if you don't distinguish between those two, between the ones that keep things moving and the ones that are just like, oh my gosh, this is going to, turn the corner, whatever. If you don't hone your self-awareness about that and get clear on what's important to you and what you value, then you actually end up under-investing in the moments that really do matter to you. And that's a real cost. It's not because you're lazy, and it's not because you have a lack of discipline. I'm going to say it's a lack of precision. So from my perspective, this is what makes Michael J. Fox's story really useful. He didn't just show up with all that exuberant energy that he has, right? He matched his energy to the moment, and not forever and not recklessly. Like, he was really clear. He was deliberate with clarity and intention where he put his energy, how much, how long, and why. So when people hear stories like his, earlier schedule, and they think, wow, that's too much, they're right if it's constant. But it wasn't constant. It was actually targeted. And that's what makes the difference. And that's what makes it effective too, because he knew what he was doing. Like, nobody could do that long term, that kind of schedule. But he knew what was at stake, and he knew what was important to him. And that brings us back to something super simple, but it's easy to miss. Most people, my opinion, are not struggling because they can't work hard. I think most people can work hard, right? But they're struggling because they haven't decided what it is they truly want. And that is the thing that's worth working hard for. And until that decision is made, until they gain that kind of clarity, then energy stays scattered. And your effort becomes diluted because you're putting it in so many different places, right? And nothing really breaks through. Nothing really surges you forward because you've laid it all out in this equal form. So, here's the question I would like to leave you with. What in your life right now, I'm going to say, deserves more of you? But maybe you're holding back because you're putting it in the same level of importance as everything else. Because sometimes it's not about burnout. It's maybe because you're hesitating. And Michael J. Fox didn't just have energy, like, he had that discernment. He knew when not to hold back, and he also knew when to take it easy. And that's what made the difference. He went for what he knew was really opportunity and potential. Yeah? Okay, so if this gave you something to think about, if you had some new thoughts or something that kind of charged you, go ahead, like the video, subscribe to the channel so you know when new ones come out, and share with someone who may also be standing in front of something that they could really go for, but maybe they're holding themselves back, and they deserve more than that. And hang around, because the series that we do here is not about effort. It's really about clarity, understanding what's important to you, and when your effort actually matters. Thanks for being here. Till next time, be well.